Mankani critiques Dawkins' argument in Chapter 7 that we do not get our morals from Holy Scriptures, and that we shouldn't get them from Scriptures, that we get morals from other sources, and therefore do not need God to be good. Mankani argues that these aren't arguments against God's existence, as whether we need God for morality doesn't affect whether God exists. Mankani challenges Dawkins' claim that God cannot serve as a moral role model. He argues this shows Dawkins' poor understanding of religious philosophy, as monotheism holds that God is incomparable to his creation. Mankani quotes Edward Fraser, who says, "The proofs for God's existence lead us to affirm the existence of something radically unlike the beings or realities we experience or could experience. Since God has nothing in common with humans, he cannot serve as a role model. Only mortal men with the same limitations can." Regarding Abraham's sacrifice of his son, Mankani acknowledges Dawkins raises good questions about what moral lessons can be derived from this story. He notes that many Muslims perform the commemorative sacrifice without understanding its deeper meaning. Mankani explains that to understand God's command to Abraham, one must understand who Abraham was. A man who stood alone against the religious ideology of his time, defeated priests and kings with rational arguments, and calmly accepted being thrown into fire without wavering in his conviction. The moral lesson, according to Mankani, is the overcoming of everything that stands between a man and the truth. He explains that the animal sacrifice symbolizes Abraham's real sacrifice of what was dearest to him. When Muslims perform this ritual, they should recall their own desires and confirm willingness to give them up at God's command. Mankani argues that polytheism segments societies into classes, citing examples of the caste system in India and racism in America. He challenges Dawkins' claim that religion is divisive, pointing out that evolutionary biology inspired eugenics and racism. Mankani argues that the elite typically reject divine messages that promote equality because these would diminish their power and privilege. Common people accept religion not because they understand philosophical arguments about God's existence, but because religious, social, and moral values make sense to them. He counters Dawkins' belief that improved education leads to a more just society, arguing that education without moral rectitude can lead to ideas like eugenics or oppressive social systems. Mankani challenges Dawkins' argument that religion causes wars and unnecessary killing. He acknowledges Dawkins' admission that non-religious people like Stalin and Hitler also infuriated wars, but criticizes Dawkins' attempts to justify their actions and distance them from atheism. Mankani questions Dawkins' claim that what matters is not whether Hitler and Stalin were atheists, but whether atheism systematically influences people to do bad things. There is not the smallest evidence that it does. He also criticizes Dawkins' argument that religious wars have killed more people than non-religious wars. Mankani responds to 3 questions. The first is, does religion advocate ruthlessness in war? Mankani cites Quranic verses showing respect for human life and explains that in Islam, war is defensive and meant to protect people regardless of religion. The Quran also prohibits killing women, children, innocents, and destroying livestock or trees unnecessarily. Mankani also highlights the Prophet Muhammad's declaration of general amnesty when entering Makkah victoriously. The second question is, have religious wars killed more people than those started by atheists? Mankani argues that believers would be more discriminating in taking lives due to religious prohibitions. He contrasts Islamic prohibitions on weapons of mass destruction with America's use of nuclear weapons in Japan and chemical weapons in Vietnam. He criticizes Dawkins' attempts to downplay these actions. The third question is, does atheism influence people to do bad things? Mankani argues that atheism removes the obstacles in one's path to achieve his or her objectives by any means necessary, by replacing objective morality with a shifting moral standard. He concludes that without religion, there is no sense of accountability or concern for spiritual perfection, leading to a focus solely on the material world.